Welcome to the Chief Endurance Officer Podcast. I'm your host, Greg McDonough. Each week, we hear real-time stories from athletes and CEOs on how to maximize performance through an endurance mindset. Let's get started. Welcome to the Chief Endurance Officer Podcast. I'm your host, Greg McDonough. I am super excited for our guest today for many, many different reasons, but he is a lifelong innovator, entrepreneur, transitioned his passion from cycling and coaching into the digital world, founding FulGaz, a revolutionary indoor cycling app that replicates the outdoor ride experience. Grew so fast and large as a virtual training platform, was ultimately acquired by Ironman. I am a user of this app, so that's full disclosure. It is not a sponsor of our show, but it should be. But again, Mike, please welcome who is calling himself today, sports technology consultant, Mike Clucas. Mike, welcome to the show.
Good to meet you, Greg.
It's great to have you. And all those things about using your products are true. It does feel like Placid when I'm on that course compared to race day, except for the rain, of course. Anyways, totally different sidebar, but you got me excited. Mike, I love talking about endurance and the endurance mindset. How has your endurance mindset impacted your life unexpectedly?
Unexpectedly, I think that often happens in retrospect. So there was a period before FulGaz really took off where I used to make apps for other people. So I had a business that was developing apps for all sorts of businesses, but that was becoming less and less viable. So I closed the doors on that and then just worked on FulGaz. But because there was no revenue, I also had a day job. So I was working two jobs. So I'd get up at like 4:30 in the morning. I'd answer support tickets at FulGaz. I'd ride to work there, answer more support tickets at lunchtime, get home, brief the developer on what we needed to do next, and just rinse and repeat day after day after day after day. And if you're a normal person in air quotes, that's completely unsustainable. But if you're used to endurance sport, you're just like, I'm just going to I'm just going to trust in the process and something will happen. The right thing will happen. And I think with that endurance mindset, often if it feels like a sacrifice, you're not the right person. It just seems like that's who you are. That's what you do. And it's not a big deal. You just do it. I'm really tired today. Well, sure, that's just part of the gig. So I think that really, in hindsight, having been an endurance athlete before, like having been a sort of, as I like to say, failed pro cyclist, you just had that mindset that you just put in and you will get through it. And yeah, eventually it worked.
And so I love it. And it's so true, right? But I'm curious, was it the passion for the app that kind of, right? There's two sides of it. One, I open up Training Peaks and I say, all right, I've got to do workout. I don't feel like doing it, but I got to do it because I know my coach is going to give me a hard time and I want to hit my goals and all these other things.
Yeah.
The other part of it is passion, right? Because there's a love for doing what you're doing. And I'm curious, my question is, was that part of the driver too that kind of kept you going through these long days working two jobs?
Yeah, it's a good question. Really, no, it was just belief in the product. So just believing that this really works for me. I'm not, I might be unique, but like all of us, we're not that unique. There's other people like us. So as long as I could kind of stick at it and more people would keep coming in every week, it should grow to be a good thing. And I remember sitting there going, if I can just get this thing to like $8,000 a month in revenue, then I can quit my day job. And eventually that happened. And then you go forward a year and it's 20,000 a month, and you go forward another year and it's like 120,000 a month, and you go, whoa, hang on. It did pay off, and it kept growing from there. But it was just that belief in the product, and it's kind of that. It's maybe arrogance isn't the right word, but sometimes you need that delusional self-belief. Mm-hmm. Like you'll stand at the side of an Ironman and it's got dark and people are still, at Kona, for instance, you'll watch people, it's dark, they've just got off the bike, and I'm standing there thinking, what? It's taking 8 hours to do the ride? How are you going to finish this? That's ridiculous. But that person's just got that ridiculous self-belief that says, no, I got this. And they will keep going.
Yeah. 100%.
and I'm one of those people. I'm one of those people finishing with the glow sticks around my neck. Um, Mike, I'd love to go back to the day that you first released the product, the app, and kind of describe to us what version 1.0 is. And the reason I'm asking this question, I was chatting up with a friend a few weeks ago, and he said, if you're not embarrassed with your first release, you waited too long to release. And it's really put a sort of perspective for me of like getting things and products and solutions out into the marketplace. Curious what your version 1.0, the first subscriber, what they were experiencing compared to what it is today.
I was looking at some screenshots of it the other day because it was the 10th anniversary of its initial release. And I'm like, if that went out to the market now, there's just no way that would be accepted. They'd be like, what are you clowns doing? Is this produced by the Muppets? It's just like, no. I mean, fundamentally it worked, but so we got the basic ride experience pretty good, but it just did so little compared to what it does now. Like the library was 12 rides and they were all filmed by me. It just worked on an iPad. That was it. It just worked with a kicker. That was it. Because that was the start of the kind of open ecosystem where different trainers all started adopting the same protocols. And the only reason that FulGaz exists and potentially Zwift and Ruby and stuff like that existed was because of two people, actually, Chip Hawkins and Murray Hughes at Wahoo. So Chip had a vision for the kicker, and he got a guy who also coincidentally lives in Australia called Murray. Murray developed all the firmware for it and really sort of did all of their behind the scenes tech to start with. So they created their own open protocol and gave people the code. So basically, as general purpose app developers, we could just grab the code they made, drop it in, and lo and behold, it would connect to a kicker and a heart rate monitor. So the impossible became possible. So they really did enable an entire industry, really, at that point.
And were you working on this idea prior to that happening? Or did you notice that it happened and you said, wow, I can build this app around indoor cycling experiences?
Well, it happened, it probably, I'm in my late 50s now, but it probably had its genesis when I was probably, in hindsight, probably when I was 14. Like, it's sometimes, have you ever read the book Outliers? So it's all about someone has a particular set of talents, but they're useless unless they happen to land in the right place at the right time, is the general sort of idea. And when I was a kid growing up in England, in hindsight, that was in the heyday of time trial racing. So as a 14, 15, 16-year-old kid, I could go and do like 3 or 4 time trials a week. And there's no pound meters, there's no heart rate monitors. It's the 80s. So you just have to do it on what we now call RPE. So it's all just done on feel. So that was the first kind of outlier moment, is just to land in a part of England where it was great to ride. It was just outside London where it's nice and quiet. And you just learn by mistakes just how to ride a good time trial. And then that turned into being quite good at it. And then traveling the world racing. And one of the places I came to was Australia. And I thought, this is really good. And after a few years, I just stayed here. Studied sports science. So I was understanding all the things I should have been doing when I was racing. It's like, and I was always kind of that guy that would, never quite realize I was never quite going to get it to kind of Tour de France level. I'd be in the sort of feeder team for the Olympics, but never get into the proper team that was going to go. So that gave me the thirst for understanding about, endurance performance and how it really works. So I studied sports science here in Australia. So that was the next piece of the puzzle. So I've got what it feels like to race and that endurance mindset, got hammered into me through those years of racing all around the world. Studied sports science, got into coaching. It's the 90s by now. Cyclists won't pay, but triathletes will. So I could think I can do this, and ended up having quite a successful triathlon coaching career. So you're understanding that more of the mindset of the athletes from other people. and what makes people go, ride well, and the importance of being fit for the task at hand. So it's all very well being generally fit, but can you get around Lake Placid quickly? It would be an example. So all those things are coming together. And then after the Sydney Olympics, the money kind of went from the state and national funding for triathlon. So my state job went. So I'm like, well, I'll go, and I've gone from coaching people to looking for money for the program. That's called marketing. I might as well go and do marketing somewhere where they pay you for it properly. So moved into technology, into IT from there, and did a lot of work building a lot of websites and a lot of apps for a lot of other people. And it turned out that there's an incredibly similar set of skills. And I think often in business, we don't necessarily realize that the skills we've gathered as an athlete or as a coach can be incredibly applicable to performing well at work. And weirdly, if you've got an elite athlete and they're not performing well enough, you're trying to pull it apart and understand why not. And it might be that their bike position is not very good. So you'll go and talk to a biomechanist about the problem, or you'll talk to a nutritionist, or you'll talk to a sports scientist about something. And you've got to be able to talk athlete and talk biomechanist, or talk whatever it might be at the other end. You've got to be able to talk specialist and generalist and combine the two. So once I moved into IT, I was listening to a user's requirements and explaining that to software engineers, and then back again. So I'd be explaining, you've got a $1 million idea with a $10,000 budget. Let's look at the best way to adjust that. And that's no different from someone saying, I want to race Kona and I'm 40 pounds overweight and I've never swum. Right, okay, that's a nice goal, but let's work out something realistic that'll get us there. So this is a very long story back into how that app kind of came to be, but I think it helps.
Yeah, 100%. And the analogy is spot on. So Mike, even going a little bit deeper in the entrepreneur journey, like you're doing app development for other people, started building your business. Eventually you got to the $8,000 a month mark. You put out your single to get this thing developed as your full-time gig. And then eventually, right, you've built the team, you've got a development team, you've got staff, you've got HR, you've got payroll, now you're running a business. From the business perspective, what kind of unexpected things popped up across that journey?
I think it was, weirdly, it's little things like if your connection to Strava goes down, within a day you'll be receiving death threats. Like it's just people want their data, and I think I've missed just a little bit of that story about cyclists to coach to sports, sports science and IT. But once the catalyst for developing FulGaz was this business developing apps for other people is becoming less sustainable. Like bigger projects are going in-house, cheap overseas developers are getting their act together. So we need something where there's sort of residual income. So that was one catalyst for FulGaz. And the other catalyst was I missed riding in England. I lived on the other side of the world. So I thought, just bring those rides back to me. So I went there and filmed some stuff and developed something that felt and looked like riding in England. So that was the idea. And so as we've built, you fast forward through kind of the hard times of getting that going and bootstrapping it and self-funding it and getting it going, and you're building that team around you. I think, what did we learn? I think it was the power of community, like building a business like this, like a subscription business, you're really building a community. And if you can really communicate with those people in the way they expect, you can, I wouldn't say get away with murder, but you can release something that's just woefully terrible in the moment. But if you treat them the right way and you're humble and transparent about it, they'll go with you on that journey, and they'll go, oh, these people are human. It's not like dealing with a bank, or a big organization. They'll go, oh, I'm really sorry, we've made a mistake. Here's a fix. And sometimes that's actually a catalyst to brand loyalty. I wouldn't recommend it as a deliberate strategy. Let's release something that'll break because then we'll fix it and look like heroes. I mean, I wouldn't do it on purpose, but as it grew, the kind of matrix of problems that you face becomes bigger and bigger and bigger, because you've gone from just a Kicker and iPads to every trainer that's on the market, Windows, Android, Macintosh, Apple TV, like the whole gamut of those things. So you get it right for most people, and then lo and behold, it's not fixed for another group of people. And the people with the problem are always the loudest. If you go online, if you go on Facebook and join a group dedicated to whatever it is, like in this industry, Wahoo or Garmin or FulGaz, or Zwift, those groups can very quickly spiral into all people at that company must die. There's just like, whoa, the negativity just leaps out. So you'll have a product where you've got like 20,000 happy people and 10 unhappy people. And what we realized pretty quickly was those 10 people can have a huge impact on the growth and reputation of your business.
So how do you, because I ran a business and we had unhappy customers from time to time and unhappy vendors from time to time. And you're right, they're the first ones to jump on to Yelp or whatever the latest platform is and to send out a complaint. And it used to keep me up at night. And to your point, it was 1 out of 100, but still it was one, and it was in a very public facing forum.
Yes.
So I'm curious, how did you and the team sort of handle the 10 unhappy versus the 25 that are happy?
Yeah, or 25,000. So there's a
25,000.
Yeah, there's a trick to it. There's a few tricks to it. I mean, the thing is, what you can't do, I think, in a public forum is go, oh no, sorry, Johnny, let's work through it with you and go through all the problems in person with them there, because then everyone else who has a bit of a problem goes, oh, can you just call me? And before you know it, you've got people paying you. If you're looking at the pure economics of it, you've got people who are paying you $15 a month wanting to have a $150 phone call to have you tell them, are you connected to the internet? So, it's to sort of say, look, we care, and respond quickly, and to then direct them to somewhere where they can get some help. So social media tends to expect a much more rapid response than if you're sending in a support ticket. We did a lot of work with these days you'd call it AI. It's really just word matching. Someone's got a complaint related to Android. Well, here's all the Android answers, that kind of thing. So there's sort of like logic within. We used Zendesk for support, still do. So you try and get back to that. And the other thing is sometimes you've got to look at how much effort someone's put into complaining. I know that sounds a bit weird, but if someone's written you a big essay and the answer literally is turn it off and on again, you can't write, dear Bob, turn it off and on again, it'll be fine. You've got to have a more elaborate response. Otherwise, even though you've solved the problem, there's very much this kind of thing of, look, I've written 6 paragraphs. I want 6 paragraphs back. So we would give them a lot of explanation as to why turning it off and on again was the way to do it. And that made people far more happy. They felt they were getting the same amount of effort back.
It's really insightful. And I suspect you learned that from trial and error. Yeah.
Through painful, like you said, up all night going, why is this person so angry? What I've replied solves their problem. I don't get it. And you realize that they just felt like they want, because if they're writing to you and complaining, they actually care. If that makes sense. The people, if someone, in a business, if someone doesn't like your product at all, you never hear from them. Generally speaking, if it's this sort of, free trial subscription business, they'll try it and go, well, that's not for me, I'm off. But the people who go to the trouble to say, this is a big problem for me, they are a potential customer. So, you try and fix that. So that worked well. And then sometimes if something beyond our control or something's happened where in a social media environment, how can I explain this? You've got one person has a problem And actually, it's more people than you think, and you get this big pile on where everyone's just going, this organization's terrible. They don't care about us. There's this huge problem here. I'm a very important man. I have 1 hour and 2 minutes to do my workout, and it took me, it didn't work. They're losing. One person's losing their mind, and other people are joining in, and it's getting worse and worse and worse and worse. You've got a public, for your own little world, your own business, you've got a public relations nightmare going on. What we do was, we would say internally, is it time to wheel out the puppies? And we go, yes, it is. And we used to post pictures of, like, we just put the cutest dog picture we could, and we'd put that in the Facebook group. And this isn't to belittle the problem. It's just to kind of get, hey, guys and girls, this is an indoor cycling app. You are not standing on the front line and you've run out of bullets. It's not life-threatening. People make mistakes, but we care. We're going to fix this. And weirdly, the picture, you just get the cutest dog picture you could, and it completely reframes the way people are sort of, thinking about it. And we would, he didn't have to come out every week, but, maybe every 6 months, he'd go, oh, hang on, this is really getting out of hand. And it's just that personal response. And I think there is a saying, you kind of live and die by your support. And particularly when you're trying to build that brand loyalty, if they get a sniff that you as a business don't care, you've got no chance.
Yeah, 100%. And Mike, that's really insightful. And I love the dog idea. I'm trying to think of how to use that in other applications of my life with my family and with my kids. And curious, over that 10-year run, when did you know that this was like, when did it feel like it's in the masses? Did it go from 1,000 users to 25,000 1 month to the next? Or was there an event? Was there something that happened that kind of blew it up?
Well, yeah.
In a positive way?
Yes. So it was doubling. If you looked at other players in the industry, so if you just looked at like Google Trends, for instance, because the industry started off pretty small. When I say the industry, the virtual cycling industry started off pretty small. You would sort of talk to other people and make friends in other parts of the industry. And sort of anecdotally, we were all doubling in size year on year. So for FulGaz, 2 times nothing is nothing. 2 times not a lot is still not much. But eventually it starts to become 2 times a salary is 2 salaries, and 2 times 2 salaries is 4 salaries, and so on and so forth. So it was growing like that. And then COVID hit. And as a software business, you don't have supply chain problems. If people want it, they can have it. And, it doubled in size in 6 weeks. Temporarily. I mean, it was actually probably, whilst that's amazing, it was probably the most stressful time we ever had. We just released a Windows version, and Windows turned out to be an utter nightmare because there are so many variations of it and variations of hardware. So that, in hindsight, had kind of come out at the worst possible time, because most people were going, oh, crikey, I need to find something and try this. And they would come straight from Zwift, and a machine that worked really well for Zwift would or would not work well for FulGaz, or it was still connected to Zwift. So they're going, your app's rubbish because it won't find the trainer. And we're going, hello, it's still connected to Zwift. Don't be ridiculous. It works fine with Zwift. It's your fault. It's customer expectations. But massive growth through COVID. And, we're looking at it going, wow, we've been doubling in size year on year. We've had a boost through COVID. We'll keep growing. But it didn't happen. So the industry, there's a couple of outliers, or one I can think of, but most of the industry players had been through the same pattern as us, doubled in size at completely the wrong time of year. The time of year we'd expect to be getting quieter, we leapt up through the initial part of COVID. There was a kind of hangover from that for probably 1 to 1.5 years. Because we forget now how long we were all stuck inside.
Sure.
So that really grew it, and then it kind of plateaued from there. So it would be like 10% growth year on year after that, where we'd been seeing 100%.
So shifting gears slightly, there's a debate that I keep poking the bear on, and it's the debate between coaching through data and coaching through feel. And I talked to many of them people on both sides of the camp of like, hey, this is a field sport, and you're on your bike, you're out on the road, and we were kind of inundated with all this data, and it becomes data overload eventually.
Yep.
If you don't use it the right way. So I'm curious what your perspective is, like, what's the right balance of, your wattage and your heart rate and all these data points compared to how you feeling? Do you feel stronger? Are you going faster? Are you bonking later? Are you finishing the right? Like, give us a sense of where, and clearly you're a data guy and tech guy, so it might be a little biased question, but I'd love to understand from a coaching perspective, how much feel also comes into the equation.
Is this a 14-part series on just this subject? This could take a while. No, it's a really good question, because I think that is one of the key limiters for people that are getting into a sport, is that there's so many numbers now. I've got an Aura ring on my finger. You can't see that if you're listening, but you can now gamify sleep. What are my sleep numbers? People are getting numbers for everything. But I think the trick, in a really quick overview of it, is use the numbers to learn what the feel is, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So you see situations where people will spend all winter indoors doing structured training sessions, and they go, wow, look at my FTP. They've got really strong doing all these erg mode sessions, and you put them out in the real world, and they've got no idea what to do. Like, they're getting nothing like what they could out of themselves. And they don't know they've almost lost what it is like to, am I thirsty? Am I hungry? Is this hurting so much it's obviously not sustainable? Or is this so easy I could probably do this to infinity? If everything has been prescribed for you, you've lost that ability to self-think. And I think it's really, really useful to have those numbers, but sometimes don't look at them in the moment, just store them away, so you can then have a look and see how you performed later and get to understand what was going on.
Yeah, it kind of helping you understand the game or the match after the final whistle's blown, to kind of assess where you were during the game.
Yeah.
Versus constantly looking at your Garmin, constantly checking your memory, constantly just like getting lost in that data, while you need to be listening to your body.
Yeah. I mean, you don't see, if we use soccer as an analogy, you don't see Ronaldo checking his heart rate and going, no, I'm not going to chase that ball. The heart rate's too high. It's so, I think it's very much a case of saying, well, okay, well, I've got to understand who I am by the numbers, and then go through and learn the process. If we're talking about endurance sport, for Ironman, I think the expression, ride for show, run for dough, which someone told me once as a pro triathlete, is just like, don't overdo the bike, because you've got to be able to run fast. Really helps. And if you're doing shorter stuff, one of my favorite expressions is, on race day, FTP goes from meaning functional threshold power to fantasy threshold power. I've been guilty of that, going, yeah, I'm sure I can manage, 320 watts today. And sure, the first 8 minutes is great. And then the rest of it, you might as well walk. So, I think it's use those numbers for longer term learning, and understand how that number equates to feel. I think it's really important. Sometimes the bodies can fool us, like body temperature, we could talk about for ages. We're only really good at understanding if we've got hotter or cooler. We can't say how hot we are. So you can go from being very overheated to quite overheated, and you're almost shivering, because your body only really understands changes in temperature as opposed to how hot you are. So stuff like that, but other stuff like, wattage and pace and thirst and things like that, you can master that pretty easily. And I think getting a mastery of, I really understand how I'm supposed to feel, is a really kind of a nice step from beginner to more consistent performer.
That's Fantastic. And in fact, this week, I think it's going to be my first long ride outdoors, and I'm fearful of what the feel is going to tell me compared to my training plan. But that's for my coach to sort out. Mike, I'd love to dig into sort of the future of the data, the technology. Like, what were you guys working on sort of 3, 5, 10 years from now? What was the vision for the industry?
Ooh, I think there's a bunch of things. I think my own personal, I don't know, it's gripe, if that's the right word, but I think something that's really worth looking at is we talk about erg mode there, where there's no sense of feel. I think there's much better ways to do that. There's stuff that I've been doing for my own training indoors where I'll be doing it on like a gradient. So if it's 2 minutes on, it'd be 2 minutes at a 5% gradient, then 1 minute level. So I've got to gauge where I can go. And the shorter I'm using my hands a lot, which won't work for audio, but the shorter the effort, the more variability there is between different people's physiologies. So if you're doing a lot of this sort of more on-off stuff, like 20-40, so 20 seconds on, 40 seconds rest, stuff like that, the difference between what you can actually do in the moment and what an algorithm might think you can do can be incredibly different. I think with some of the AI-driven platforms, I think there's a huge opportunity to be talking to that during the session rather than after the session. So if you've got something like TriDot that's really good at adapting your training as you go along, it would be awesome to be talking to TriDot interval by interval. And the little TriDot robot can be sitting there laughing at you going, Greg, there's no way you can manage that today. Let's back that off for you, so that it's changing that for you in the moment rather than retrospectively going, oops, overdid that one. Let's change that for tomorrow. So it's adapting minute by minute as opposed to day by day. And I think that's a critical step in really taking advantage of some of the technology that's coming out in the background. And I think the other part of it as well is I was talking to the guys at Training Peaks about this and just saying with the whole TSS thing, that's another number you can get really obsessed with is what's my training stress score at the moment. That's training stress score, but you also need a kind of life stress score. Like for me, traveling a lot, like what's the TSS of a transatlantic flight? It's quite a lot, but it's just a stress score. It's not going to make you any fitter, but it's going to stop you being able to train as much when you've arrived on the other side of the Atlantic. So I think there's using the huge computational power that we're starting to have for things to be able to let you decide more what to do in the moment could be hugely beneficial. And finally, the final piece of that puzzle, I think, is getting it more kind of leveled out between platforms. So my Aura Ring, most days it'll go, if it spoke in Australian, it would say, mate, you're good to go. You're fine. Whereas my Garmin would be going, I think we better book a hospital bed for you. You've really overdone it. Take it easy for 5 days. So it's getting some consistency there would give people more confidence in that. But I think it's that really in the moment integration, really sort of going, what's the thing that's going to make Greg or whoever better now?
I love it. That would be fantastic. Because it's true, right? There are other stressors unless all you're doing is you're the top tier professional athlete, and they still have life stressors because they're traveling in whichever route. There's other aspects and they've got families and things. There's other aspects in your life that peak and that flow depending on the day.
Yes.
And it does impact your training and what you could put out. Even morning versus afternoon, I find has a difference in my performance level.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Mike, we've got an audience member who's thinking about doing business in the endurance industry space. Any words of insights, recommendations or thoughts for them?
I think don't be shy to mention your athletic prowess, I guess, or athletic history, because I'm used to look for, and I know other people do the same thing. You actually deliberately look for people who had endurance sport on their resume because you knew that they wouldn't have such a 9-to-5 mindset, that you knew that they would get positively obsessed with what they were doing. I'm not promoting slavery, but I'm just saying that you know that you're going to get someone who's done, if they've done exceptional things outside of the workplace, that'll often then apply to their mindset in the workplace. So don't be afraid to mention that when you're going for jobs, because it is actually an important part of who is this human being.
Absolutely. How about for the entrepreneur who's looking to build a business in that space?
Ooh, I think actually there is one piece of advice, which is another saying that I have is that the narrower the niche, the deeper the passion. So for me, it was like people that love just going for a ride in nice places by themselves was really the crux of it. Whereas the temptation is to say, we need more customers, we need more features, or we need to appeal to a broader audience. And I've seen lots and lots of examples in this industry and others where they've got a great product with a great following and they try and spread that out wider. So particularly if you're trying to do this in the, Silicon Valley startup, big fund money, they want to be saying, well, what's the size? What's your total addressable market? What's your TAM? They want it to be everybody. And it can be very, very profitable for a small team if it's an incredibly narrow niche.
That's great advice. Mike, somebody in the audience wants to get in touch with you. What's your social media platform of choice?
Ooh, I don't really do social media much these days. I kind of when you run a business, you kind of don't want people to be able to find you.
Those 10 angry customers coming back again.
No, you've ruined my life because I could only do 9/10 of my session. No, I think if they want to contact me, please do. It's email would be best. It's clucas@mac.com. So that's CLUCAS, M for Mike, @mac.com. Happy to send me the most absurd questions you want because they're not absurd for us. Just go for it.
Yeah, awesome. And we'll include those in our show notes. Mike, I've loved our show today. I enjoyed talking about posting the dog picture and how that sort of just relieves some tension from your customer base. We also explore using your data to learn the feel, right? To understand, oh, I did X, Y, and Z numbers and it made me feel A, B, C. And then really what you've built over these 10 years is, to your point you made earlier, this community, right? With brand loyalty, and they followed you through the ups and downs. It's a great product. Thank you for being an innovator and having an influence in my life. Audience members, if you like the show, please subscribe. Please share Mike's message. Let's get this show out to the greater audience so we can learn how to be entrepreneurial and keep an eye on our future technologies. Mike, it's been great having you on the show.
Thanks for asking such great questions. Been a pleasure.
Thank you for tuning in to the Chief Endurance Officer podcast. To hear more inspiring stories and strategies around the endurance mindset, be sure to subscribe below or visit us at chiefenduranceofficer.com. Until next time, keep pushing those limits